right, it is 12:06, so I am going to start. As it says, today, day 63, the 12th of April, we were going to complete the Chapter 13 Updated Quarterly Sales App program. I will tell you, I went back and made massive changes in mine. I got it down to 10 errors, and when I tried to get those fixed, it bumped up again to 20 errors. So what I did was I put the author's version of the finished program in a private repository, and I sent each one of you an invite this morning. If for some reason you didn't get that, please email me and let me know, but it did say on there that you all had an invite. So try to complete the assignment if you can. And if you can't, just turn in what you got. That's okay. All right. For today, we're going to talk about Chapter 14, the dependency injection and unit testing, but we're just only really going to focus on the unit testing part. Tomorrow we'll go over Chapter 15. Friday will be our typical lab period. Monday, and I don't know if we can do it all in a day or not, we'll see. We'll go over Chapter 16, which is on authentication and authorization. And if need be, we will spend 2 days on it. And then we'll jump right into Chapter 17, which is how to deploy an ASP.NET project. So again, the idea is by sometime around a week from today, we should hopefully be finished with the book. All right, what do we do then? We'll talk about that next week. Your Chapter 12 and 13 work is due this Sunday by midnight. There will not be any homework assigned for Chapter 14 or for Chapter 15. All right, I will talk a little bit about what's at the end of those chapters and recommend that you try it, but if you don't, that's totally going to be your call, of course. Now, a couple things before we get started here. The first is we had last Thursday, as you know, we had our staff meeting, our IT staff meeting. And during that time, Evan, who's now the department chair, Evan said that he said, I'm going to be sending out these things to each one of you and you have to fill them out. And what it is basically is they want to know if anyone who's going to graduate in May next month already has a job in the IT field. Now, the chances are if we have in the IT program here and the IT program at St. Louis and the AWD program here and the AWD program in St. Louis, if we have 50 students total, my guess is no more than 10% of them already have a job in the field. That said, I want to show you, this is what he sent to us. As it says, we are being asked to gather program placement rates for the spring 2023 graduates. Now, if I was doing this, I would be gathering that information now for people who graduated in December. Then in December, I would do a program placement things for people who graduated in May, but they're doing it the way they're doing it. What they want to be able to do is when potential students come in and ask and say, what is your placement rate? They want to be able to tell them. Right now, a lot of it is guess and conjecture, and that's because a certain number of students, once they graduate, they kind of drop off the grid. We're not sure if they have gotten a job or not. I would ask that any of you watching this, if you get a job in the field, please just send me an email. You know, you don't have to say anything other than, hey, I got a job, I'm working so-and-so, and I'm a programmer. That'd be great. Now, so this is what I have to fill out. And there's already things about it we've all complained about, such as what you're making is none of our business. Yeah, I would never ask a student what they're making. So they're totally cool with allowing us to leave that blank. But what I'm going to do is I will fill out my name there, the name of everybody in the class here, working in industry. If it's all no's, that's okay. And if there is a yes, I'll put the employer there and the position there. So what I would ask each one of you to do is send me an email and just say, Working in industry, yes or no? And if it is yes, say your employer and say your position. If you're working, but it's not in the IT field, you don't have to say anything. But just put a no here, or if you're not working at all, put a no there. That's totally fine. I'm asking that you do this, and if possible, get it into me today or tomorrow, because Evan wants these things. He was just told yesterday at a department meeting, he was just told that they're supposed to have them in on Friday. He did not know that. So he sent this out this morning to us at 8 o'clock this morning. All right. And I saw it earlier this morning, so I thought I'd just mention it to you now. So if you all would please do this. If I don't hear from you, I'm just going to put down, no, you're not working in the field in your name. All right. But I'd rather have verification from you if possible. All right. Enough. Now, I sent you 2 emails today. This was the first one that said again, today we'll finish up chapter 13 and go through 14, etc. And then I sent this one afterwards. All right. And I want to, not fast, but fairly quickly, go over what's on each one of these 4 links that are here. All right. What I did was I literally kind of probably what a lot of you might do, and that is I kind of Googled ASP.NET 6 core MVC unit testing and started looking at the stuff that came up then. All right. One of the first ones that came up was this one. It was by Cottrell Coding, and it's about 20 minutes long. And we're going to try to do the exercise that he does in there. We're going to try to do that in just a little bit. Okay. What's kind of nice about it is he does it based on a bookstore app. All right. So you can go back and you can look at that one if you're curious. All right. The next one, and I've watched many presentations from this guy. He's literally got a website that's called IamTimCorey.com. He puts out a lot of stuff for free, and he also has classes that he charges for. All right. And they're typically not cheap. They run anywhere, minimum I've ever seen one of his classes on sale was maybe $100, but they're typically closer to $500. Now, I saw this thing this morning that he's got an intro to unit testing in C# using XUnit. I have not watched it. I watched the other one that I mentioned to you a minute ago. It was only 20 some minutes long. This is an hour and 40 minutes. My guess is we'll be done today by no later than 2 o'clock, and if not earlier. And I'm going to watch this once we're done today. All right. I got a couple things. I've gotten emails from people in the class saying I'm having problems with this and with that. I'm going to try to go through that and then take a look at this. I don't know if it's good. I don't know if it's not good, but I thought at least it sounded like it was decent. All right. Then I went through some of the Microsoft documentation and found these 2 things. The first, and I'm going to go over this in just a moment, is unit testing best practices with .NET Core and .NET Standard. And the other one is unit testing in C# in .NET Core using .NET Test and XUnit. Now, this one is a lot shorter. This one actually has got an example in it, and it's a very simplistic example where they're just checking a program out that's supposed to determine whether or not a number is prime. All right. But this one I thought was particularly good. This best practices. Now, the first thing they do in here is they're trying to sell you on unit tests. And first of all, let's talk about it because we're going to go into the book in just a minute. But what the heck is even a unit test? All right. When I did my first project as a programmer, all right, what I had to do was literally go and modify some existing code. It was telephony, or the thing that makes your telephone work. But this was back in the days of rotary phones and the like. So yeah, it's been quite a few years. But the point is, I had to go in and add some new features and functionality, and I had to go in and modify some existing features and functionality. All right. Then what I had to do before they even let me go in and test my code, we had a laboratory with phones in it, etc., to make sure that it worked, was I had to write what was called a design unit test specification. And I'm not exaggerating to you, it was about 500 pages long because I had to try to come up with every single test for my code that I could think of. And when I wrote those particular tests, basically they had to be very simplistic, and they had, the idea was all of them would pass. And if they wouldn't pass, what I would do to help make them pass. All right. And I had to have that design unit specification. I had to run it by a bunch of people who were already coding in the same area that I was in. And it wasn't bad. Not everybody agreed with all my tests. Not everybody agreed with the way I was doing things. So I got blasted a little bit. It was my first job doing something like that, so I kind of expected it. But by and large, it was pretty good. It was all afternoon long. It was like 4 hours. We took a break or two in there. All right. But once everything was agreed to, then I had to amend my document to put in all the changes that were requested. Then I had to show that I had run and passed all around 500 tests. Then I had to take that document, sign off on it, and give it to what was called our system test department. They went in and ran my tests and a bunch of their own tests. The idea behind writing tests like this is you want to make sure that if you are creating a product, modifying a product, whatever, that you don't break anything that's already out there. All right? Because what you don't want to do is put some code out there, put a product out there, whether it's new, modified, or whatever, and have it break right away. Because then that is going to be the impression that people have when they think of that product. All right. So you typically write these kinds of tests. Now, there's a lot more to it than that. Some of this stuff they'll talk about in here. All right. And I'm going to go through most of the junk that's in here. I don't want to read a line from here. All right. As far as, all the reasons and the rationale. So they say, why should you do it? Well, the idea is if you write tests ahead of time, all right, there's actually a thing that's called test first development. And with test first development, believe it or not, what people do is they write the tests before they even write the code. All right. And it's, some people think that it's really good to do it that way, write the test first. Sometimes it's called TDD, test driven development. All right. But I've been on that side too, where I had to write tests first. Okay. And the idea is when you write those, it makes it easier because you know exactly what you're looking for when you're testing. All right. Plus, if you go in and make changes, you know exactly what it is you have to test. These tests, as it says there, they should run like that. They should be very, very, very simple tests. And again, we're going to look at some in just a few minutes. All right. Now, they talk about regression there. Okay. And what regression typically means is you are adding something to an existing application and your stuff doesn't break, but you break something that was already there. So it's very, very important that you not only test your stuff, but you test to make sure that once your new stuff or your updated stuff is brought in and acclimated with everything that's already out there, that you don't break anything that was existing. All right. As it says, and this is a key one, this was always considered executable documentation. like I said, I had to take that document and I had to go in and I had to take that document and give it to our system test group. They ran all of my tests. Then they went in and they wrote some of their own and they ran those. All right. And if anything failed, whether it was my test or one of theirs, it got brought back to me again. I had to fix it. I had to do regression testing to make sure I didn't break anything new. Then I gave it back to them. And this is how the process worked. All right. Now, they do talk about naming and stuff like that. We'll get into that in just a little bit. All right. The next thing they talk about here is less coupled code. Now, you may or may not have heard of tightly coupled and loosely coupled before, but let's talk about what they are. All right. I mentioned to you several times over the past year and a half to 2 years, such things as that in an ideal world, a function does one thing. So if you are inputting 8 pieces of information into a program and you have to validate each one of those pieces, ideally, that would be 8 different routines that you would write. All right. Now, is that the case? No. Most people write one routine and validate all 8 things in there. But the problem is, if you keep adding more and more and more things to it, then over time, that routine gets really big and bloated. And if you end up with a problem, now you've got a lot of code you've got to go through to look for the problem. Whereas if your code is more loosely coupled, where each routine does one thing, if something goes wrong, you know exactly where it went wrong and how and where to fix it. All right. Some characteristics that they give there, again, should simple tests. That's why they're fast. All right. Unit tests, they should be isolated. Okay. And eventually they won't be isolated, but when you first run them, you want to make sure nothing that you wrote is broken. Eventually, again, they will be integrated in with what's already there, and you still want to make sure that your stuff doesn't break and any existing stuff doesn't break. All right. Repeatable. You should be able to run it over and over and over again, and it should have the same results every time. All right. Self-checking. It should automatically know whether or not it passed or failed. You're going to see some of that in just a minute. All right. Timely, as it says, it shouldn't take long to write. All right. Code coverage in an ideal world. In an ideal world, you'll be able to test as much of the code as possible. All right. But even think about the bookstore example. Okay. If you've got maybe, let's just say in your bookstore, you've got, I don't know, 25 books, and you've got 15 authors and etc. You start thinking about all the different combinations in there. It could take a real long time to test everything. And not only do you want to test to make sure that the stuff you wrote works, you also want to make sure that where you have accounted for error, that if an error does happen, the code handles it. All right, that's just as important. And you can see there are links and stuff in here for more. Now, the next thing they talk about are mocks, okay? And you can see the stuff that's written in here. Again, I don't want to sit and read to you, all right? The one that we've actually looked at a little bit in here or in some of your classes has been a stub. And when you write a stub, so if let's say that I really wanted to write this the right way and I was inputting these 8 pieces of information and I wrote 8 different routines. So I've got first name, last name, address, city, state, zip, cell phone, and email. I think that's about 8 pieces of information. All right. And once I do that, I run it, I run a test for the first name to make sure that it worked. I could write stubs for all the other routines, which would just be a function with some kind of a print statement inside that says, I'm in this function. And then as I go in and write the other functions, the code in my stubs is going to be removed and replaced with actual code. All right. Then they also talk about fakes and mocks. All right. So it says a fake can be a stub or a mock object, but it's not going to be something that's going to typically be in the final product. A mock, as it says there, decides whether or not the unit test passed or failed. All right. And we're going to talk about the 3 A's in just a few minutes. If you say, I don't know what you mean, you will in just a couple minutes. All right. So they come in and they start writing some stuff in here. I don't expect what's right there to really make a whole heck of a lot of. All right. So they're, with this var mock order equals new mock order. Well, there would have to be some kind of a class called mock order. All right. So it says the preceding example would be a stub referred to as a mock. In this case, it's a stub, and that doesn't really matter. All right. So when we look at this in here, notice once you set something up, then you test it, and then you write an assert. And this assert will say whether or not what you worked on succeeded or whether or not what you worked on failed. All right. And again, you're going to see all of this in just a couple minutes. All right. So then they give you a bunch of best practices. And some of it, I'm not going to lie to you, sounds like, oh my God, this is stupid. This is too much work, etc. But there's reasons and there's rationales for it, such as naming your test. What they're gonna do is they're gonna talk about different things in here and show bad examples and better examples. All right. Standards are important. A lot of times you won't have any choice. But notice the difference between these. Test single and add single number, return same number. The second one, even though it's a lot more to type, is much more descriptive. All right. You want to have the names of these tests very descriptive. And typically they will follow a certain format or a certain pattern. Not only that, you will take like tests and you will put them into the same folder. And in the same way, that folder should be have a very descriptive name. All right. So again, these are the 3 A's right here. Arrange, act, and assert. All right. Arrange, you can kind of look at, this is kind of like when you would basically create things and initialize them to whatever you want them initialized to. Act would be the actual physical test itself. All right. And assert would say whether or not it succeeded or failed. What you're going to see in just a few minutes when we go through an example, all right, what you're going to see then is the way that it's something that's called the Test Explorer window. And when we run through this and you try to run tests, if a test succeeds, it's going to come back and it'll show you that it succeeded, and it'll literally take and put, like, I don't know what it was. It was like a circle with a plus sign in it or something like that. And it'll be green, meaning that it succeeded. If it comes back as red, it failed. All right. So again, we'll talk about all that stuff in just a second. Now they say that you should arrange your tests to separate what's being tested, all right, from what's being arranged and what's being asserted. All right. And yeah, again, readability is an important aspect. And it's again, because of the fact, like I had when I worked here, or when I worked as a programmer, I should say, many companies, especially companies of any size, will probably and typically have their own system test department. All right. So when you look in here, notice what they have. All right. So it says here bad, arrange and assert. Well, there's no act in here. All right. Why? Because what they're doing is they're taking the act part and they're putting it inside of the assert, which is not what you should be doing. We're talking about breaking things up. Even when you write it better like this is not a long bit of code in here. One line for your arrange, one line for your act, one line for your assert, but you have pulled everything out into one of the areas. It is possible that you have nothing to initialize, so you don't have an arrange. All right. But you typically will have an act and you typically will have an assert. All right. Write minimally passing tests. What we're trying to do here by writing these unit tests is rather than you having to write your program, run your program, test something, have it succeed or fail, then possibly even stop the program, start it again, run another test, see if it succeeds or fails. You got this file where you can run as many tests on it as you want to or need to run and keep track of them. So you're not constantly having to rewrite the same tests over and over and over again. It says there you want to focus on behavior. All right, so again, they've got a better and a worse. So let's see. Var string equals new calculator. Var actual equals add, okay? And then the assert for the actual. All right. So why is, what's wrong with this and why is this better? Well, again, 0 is probably as easy as you can make things. May have told you the story, I'll make it quick. Years ago that I had a student, I had given them one of their first assignments and they were to basically do some operations where they entered some numbers and then did some mathematical operations on them. Now, I didn't say this and I purposely didn't, but they were supposed to enter like 5 values. And I walked around and I wanted to see what people were entering. Now, if it was 5 values, I might enter 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, or 10, 20, 30, 40, and 50. And there was one young lady, she was entering like pi. And and I said, why are you doing that? Well, I want to see if it worked. Yeah, but when you're first writing it, you want these tests to be minimalistic. You want them to work and you want them to be as simple as possible. All right. It says avoid magic strings. All right. It says naming variables is important, if not more important than naming them in production code. All right. They shouldn't contain magic strings. What does that mean? Well, when we look in here, all right, you've got all this stuff. Here we got an assert throws overflow exception. All right. And then in here, we're basically when we're going to be throwing the same kind of exception, but you'll know why you were throwing it. All right. They're using maximum result in here as opposed to 1001. And again, this can make it as simple as possible for people who are reading your test document and have to go and run the same types of tests. It's not all that different from what we have talked about in the past, where we said that when you test things on the client side, after you get done and you send it over to a server, quite often the same tests are run also on the server side. All right. You shouldn't have logic in tests. All right. In other words, as it says there, you don't want to put control statements in there. These are supposed to be minimalistic, as simple as possible. All right. So here they've got a for loop, and here they've done it without a for loop. All right. Prefer helper methods. Well, if you can write some code, if you've got something that's going to be done in several of your tests, then rather than writing the same code over and over again, here it is considered okay to write a helper method that you bring into your project on an as-needed basis. All right, you can see the whys. I'm not going to read them to you. All right. So they've got an example here, and they say, and then a better one here. Okay. All right. Again, I already told you this. Write only one act per test. Even if you've got two things that seem, well, if I do this, then this happens, and this happens, then write two tests. All right. And they show you the why in there. You can read that yourselves. Hopefully, one of the things that this chapter gets across to you and you start to realize is that if you go to work for a company of any size or magnitude, it's not just you. All right. And you've got to be real leery of not breaking anything that's out there or not introducing anything that's going to break something, whether it's yours or something else. All right. Validate private methods by unit testing public methods. Yeah. Now, I don't know if I agree with this or not. It says in most cases, there shouldn't be a need to test a private method. Well, if you've written it, you should have a way of publicly calling your private method to make sure that it works. That's my take on this. Notice a unit test must have full control of the system under the test. And it says it can be problematic. All right. It says when you consider calls to static references. Okay. So it says if you had something like this, first of all, you shouldn't even have an if, but how could it be tested? And then they show ways that it can be tested. All right. The other one, that the stuff that's in here, I looked at this. I don't know how good it is or is not. This order unit tests.net. I didn't look at this one because it's MS test, which we're not using. And I did not look at this one because it's NU unit and .NET Core, which we're not using. This one right here is what I'd already mentioned to you. And that is, this has actually got an example of unit testing in it. Very simple with prime numbers, okay, etc. All right, and this is the one that I just put out there. I just clicked on that link and they talk about how to order these things. Looks pretty simple. All right, so with that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump into the book and I'm going to jump into chapter 14. Give me a second here. I guess I closed out of my Red Shelf account. Now, again, let me back this up. The first part of this chapter talks about how to use dependency injection and unit testing. I went through these first dozen pages and I must have read it, I don't know how many times, at least 4 or 5 times. And I was more confused every time I went through it. So I've decided we're not going to even do that section on dependency injection. You're not responsible for anything that's in there. We're not going to do anything that's in there. I'm going to jump right up to here, and I want to go through this, how to get started with unit testing. All right. Then I'm going to skip this stuff here, and I'm going to jump right down into the bookstore.tests project. Then we're going to look at how to do an example ourselves. So this, how to get started with unit testing. And again, I don't want to sit and read to you. They're talking about how to automate working on an application. All right. And one of the first things they say there is that unit testing provides a way of isolating individual units of code. So you're testing each function or method. All right. Do you have to test each function or method? It depends on what the function or method is doing. It depends on how much time you have. It depends on a lot of different things. You are, just because you've got 5 methods doesn't mean that's going to be 5 tests. All right. And we've talked about things like this before. As an example, let's just pretend for a second that we were going to write a calculator. And the idea behind this calculator is it would add, it would subtract, it would multiply, and it would divide. We'll just leave it at that. We won't worry right now about square roots or anything else. We could add that stuff as well. All right. Well, add should be simple. You probably could run one test on that. All right. But should you run more than one? Well, what if you add negative numbers together? All right. The result should be negative, right? You might want to do that. What if you add 0 to a number to make sure, etc.? Subtraction, the same kind of thing. If you take a positive number and you subtract from it a negative number, a minus minus, that means to basically add it, type of an idea. So there's all sorts of things, but it becomes even more important when you start to work in projects that have ranges. All right. One of the things that we're doing right now, and I think you probably did it as well, either with me or Evan, is we have worked with BMI, for example, body mass index. So when we did BMI, I'm not going to write any of it down, but the idea was you could be either underweight, optimal weight, overweight, and obese. All right. Now there's even 3 or 4 different levels of obesity if you wanted to put that in. But the point is, all right, the point is that if your BMI is greater than or equal to 0, but less than 18.5, you're underweight. So you'd want to make sure that even if somebody has a BMI of 18.49999973, for example, they're considered underweight. So when you've got ranges, you want to check above the range on one end, above the range on the other end, and within the range. All right. I mean, I used to work for a guy when I was at AT&T who basically believed it was impossible to test too much, to write too many tests. All right. Okay. They mentioned there, each unit test is a method in a project that you typically include in your Visual Studio solution. We are literally building a separate project inside of our solution that will just hold the tests. And to be honest with you, I cannot think of a better internal documentation system for any application to show that the application works as expected than to have something like that in there. All right. They mentioned that these should be executed often. Well, as you're writing the program, yes, but anytime you make any kind of change to the program, all right, if it could have any kind of an effect on a test you've already run, you should run it again. All right. They have done tests. They meaning people who do this kind of stuff for a living. On the bottom of the page, it says it can save you development time. The earlier in the process that you find an error, the cheaper it is to fix it. All right. I spent my last year and a half when I was at AT&T. All right. There was a lot of reasons and a lot of political reasons. I got one promotion, but I should have been up for other ones, but they only gave a certain number of promotions per year. And after not getting that promotion over 2 years, I'm like, I'm not going to get one as long as I'm in this department. So I changed departments and I worked with this control systems department. And one of the things that we did was we tracked errors when they were found in the process and how much it cost to fix them. And the cheapest thing I ever saw for an error to fix it was $50. Somebody saw it real early in the process, documented it, boom. It was before much of anything had been done, so it was $50. The most expensive one that we tracked was $5 million. And the reason for that is the code had already been put into production, and then they discovered there was an error. It's kind of like when you get a recall on a car where something can potentially happen. Well, they were worried about this thing. So what they had to do was they had to take this whole telephony system unit and they had to take it down, literally. And it was down for half of a day. So all the time it was down. And this was back in the days when anytime you picked your phone up and you got dial tone, yeah, that used to be something you got when you picked up your phone, that there was a cost incurred in there. You used to have to pay for long distance calls, with stuff like that. All right, so again, save you development time. The sooner in the process you find it, the cheaper it'll be to fix it. All right. So you can see the 3 bullets in here. All right. The idea is you want to make sure your stuff works, and any type of correlation your stuff has between other stuff that works, and that nothing is breaking anything else. And they're explaining again in here, you can read it yourselves, why you want to do this. All right. Now, this is what we're going to get into for a minute. Let me tell you that I'm going to do this, and I haven't tried it yet because I just watched this guy's tape this morning. So we're trying something as a class. It may fail. I don't think it will, but it could. We are going to start a new X unit project in just a couple minutes and try to go through some of this stuff. Now, I'm going to come right back to it. At the end of this chapter, you'll notice that there's about 3 things they want you to do. First is run the app and add this. No, you don't have to. All right. But then next, they ask you to add a test project for your solution and write a test. Finally, they ask you to open the Test Explorer, run the test, and see whether or not it works. Then they ask you to write another test and run that, and then write another test class and run that. To do that, no. I promised you you were not going to get any homework on chapter 14 and chapter 15. That said, I am in the process right now of writing your final exam. All right. I'm going to run the final exam by Mr. G on Friday. If he agrees to it, then I will hand your final exam out probably a week from tomorrow. And you will have 2 weeks to work on it. All right. But one of the things that's going to be in there is you writing up a unit test plan. All right. So it's the reason that you might want to go through these at the end of the chapter is twofold. Number one, you're going to be doing something like this anyway. And number two, remember these exercises, you can try them yourselves, but you also have the solutions for these. You have the solution already. So you can look at it and see if what you did was correct or incorrect. All right. So this is what we're going to be doing in just a minute. we're going to add a project, and they go through the steps in here. So when we do this, if something doesn't work, all right, we will try it, like I said, together as a class to see if it works. All right. So you can see it's not a hard process. Right click on the solution, choose add new project. Well, that brings this up, which we've seen umpteen times in here. Now, a couple things that change. Yes, C#, we want this to be set to all platforms and all project types in here. All right. And then, we want, for the X unit, we'll want to give it a name and a location. It's going to be created as another project in your application. All right. Now, as it says, typically it's named after the web app. Since we're doing bookstore, we could call it like bookstore unit test or something like that. All right. Then it says for this to work correctly, it must include a reference to the web app project. What does that mean? That if we are creating a project, a new project, and it's going to be called bookstore bookstore unit test, that at the top we have a using in there that says using bookstore. In other words, we want a reference to the actual project that we're working with. And they talk about how you can do that in here. We've actually done something like that before. All right. Typically what you do then is you start breaking up the different classes, as it says in here. All right. It says you right click the project and select add class. Well, you know how to do that already. All right. Then the next thing is on how to write one of these tests. All right. Now, when you look in here, these are some of the things that you can use with asserts. All right. And I'm not going to read any of them. They also mention 3 attributes. All right. And notice what they are. The first is fact. These are decorators that you can put in. That identifies the method. Theory, as it says, it identifies the difference between fact and theory is theory has parameters, so things passed in. Inline data are things that you want to actually test. All right, again, we will be looking at that shortly, okay? Now, when you start to look at this, let's take a look at it and see if we can figure out what it is. All right, so we've got their fact. All right, and you'll notice that with a fact right there, it's called active method returns a string. Fine. And it's got nothing passed in, as opposed to theory, which does have things passed into it. So if it's just an empty set of parens, you put fact there. If you are passing in one or more parameters, you put theory there. All right. And with the theory here, it says this is what we're going to be trying to test. All right. And if that doesn't make sense, please bear with me till after the break. And we're going to be taking a look at that, how it works, what it is, etc. All right. Now, I already mentioned this to you, but as it says right there in that bottom bullet, code in a unit test, it's recommended that it be organized in this AAA: arrange, act, and assert. All right. Now, how do you run these tests? Well, what's going to happen there is, and it depends on how, this is what they've got up here is pretty big for lack of better words. All right. But you want to run not the Solution Explorer, the Test Explorer. And there are different options that you can run with this. All right. So as it says from the menu, we're going to use Test Explorer. In the past, we've just clicked this, when it starts, we just click there. No, we don't want to do that. All right. Now, as it says there, the Explorer will show whether or not the tests have been run. All right. It'll show what passed and what failed. Now, it's kind of hard to see here, but anything that'd be green like this means it passed. If it's red, it'll mean it failed. All right. And I think there's a blue one too that hasn't been run yet. All right. Let's see if it says that in here. Yeah, which is passed or failed. It also shows how long it took to execute each unit test. Now, the first time you run this, it takes a little bit longer because it's getting stuff set up and a bunch of system stuff set up. After that, when you run this, it should be very, very quick. As it says here, test that succeeded, get a green check mark. Test that failed, get a red X. Tests that have yet to be run, get a blue exclamation point. So you can take a look at these. And there are a lot of different options, as mentioned here, that you can do from the Test Explorer, such as, well, you can have a file that has maybe 10 different unit tests in it. You run the first one, it works. Now you write another one. Well, you can tell it there's a skip that's in there. So you could tell it to skip the first test because it's already been run. All right. Otherwise, with 10 tests, when you get all done with all 10, you might want to go back and remove the skip and then run all 10 tests to make sure that nothing broke, nothing else type of an idea. And this is what they're pretty much explaining in here. I'm not expecting that this is a boatload of sense. All right. But I'm asking that you give it a chance, for lack of better words. All right. Now, what they have in here, if you look, this is their bookstore tests. This is what we're going to look at after the break. All right. Now, this gets really into it heavy here, and it was not my goal to confuse you. So like I said, after the break, we're going to run through an example. And my hope is that when we run through this, A, everything will work, and B, it'll make sense, and C, if it doesn't make sense, you will ask. All right. But I'm going by what this guy wrote in that one presentation that I mentioned right here. And if you'd want, then you can go back and look at it. And as I also mentioned, I'm going to look at this one to see if I missed anything. But this being upwards of 2 hours, I didn't have time to do it this morning. I'm going to work on it later. All right. So they talk about these fakes in here to set stuff up. And when you look at it this way, even in the applications that we have written, if we go back and we look at the bookstore application, there is enough stuff in here for us to write tests on, to at least start to see whether or not stuff appears to work or doesn't appear to work. And in fact, that you're going to see this in just a moment. Now, this is Mach. This is another test unit tool that you can use. All right. We're going to look at this after the break. All right. As it says, the next few figures present some of the tests in the test project. But before we do this, we're going to actually go in and we're going to attempt to do what that author had done in that 20-minute presentation I showed you before. I've got all the steps laid out, and we'll see whether or not the stuff in here works. And if it doesn't work, okay. All right, then we'll go right to this. Otherwise, we'll go through, there's about 20 steps or so that I want to go through with you on here. I don't know how long it's going to take. All right, looks like 22 steps that I've got written down here. Some of them are kind of repetitive, but then we'll look at this. If we get done with all that by 2, then we're done for the day. If not, we'll take another break right around 2 o'clock, and then we'll pick it up there. All right, it is 1 o'clock. I'm going to give you 10 minutes. We are going to start back up again at 1:10. I will see you then. All right, it is 1:10, so I'm going to start up right away. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab, this is the thing. I got an email the other day. I think it was from John. I think it was from you. I don't remember. Asking for the working version of the Chapter 3 bookstore. This should be it. This should be working as far as I know. I'm going to bring it up and I'm going to run it quick just to make sure that it does work. This is not my version. This is the author's version. So all right, well, that looks good. Yeah, that's their tuxedo books. And let's go. I want to grab a couple things from here that I'm going to be able to use. So let me do a screenshot here. And I'm going to do another screenshot from the author's page. If you don't know what I'm doing, you hopefully will very shortly. All right, now I've got that stuff, so I'm just going to get started. So I've got, this is the running copy. I'm going to stop the run. All right, you can see what's in here. Again, this is from the author. This is the Chapter 13 book. All right, so I'm going to come in here and I'm going to, now everything is closed. I'm going to right mouse click on the solution, not on the project, on the solution. I am right mouse clicking and I'm choosing add and new project. All right, I know we have done things like this before. All right, so what I want here is C#. I want this to be all platforms. And I want this over here to be what do we have here? I think it's test, like that. All right, and you'll see what comes up in here now. All right, these are all the different testing things that are in here. Okay, the only one we're concentrating on is XUnit because that's what was in our textbook. But as you can see, there's also MS test, there's NUnit test, and there's WebDriver test, and there's just unit test. But we're just going to concentrate on this one right here. All right, so I want you to choose XUnit test project. I'm hoping you're following along with me here. And click next. All right. Now, again, we should name this something that is similar to the name of our project. Well, our name of the project is Bookstore. All right. And this is going to be tests. So I'm going to call this Bookstore. In fact, I believe in our textbook, let me double check, but I believe in our textbook that they call it bookstore.tests or something like that. I'm going to look. We don't have to call it the same thing. Of course, we can call it anything we want to. Now I lost my book. So they call it bookstore.tests project. We'll call it the same thing. So again, bookstore.tests. Right, again, .tests. So got it. .tests. There we go. And you can see the location should already be set. All right, it's going to be put right inside of the project that we're currently in. So again, it is strongly suggested that you name it something very similar to the actual project name. All right, the framework, Well, yeah, it's going to be the same framework that we're using here. All right. And it's started. Okay. Now, the file that came up here, they created something called unittest1.cs. We can keep that name. We can add another name. We can make this as simple or as complex as we want to. I'm going to try, since this is our first go around with this, I'm going to try to keep this as simple as possible. All right. So the first thing that I want to do here is I'd like to get rid of that thing, but it won't let me. So I'm going to come up here and I'm going to go to Tools. Yeah, we've done this before. I'm going to go to our old NuGet package manager and I'm going to go down to manage NuGet packages for solution. You've seen this before. Now, no, I don't want to go in. We've already got installed in here our Newtonsoft and our other stuff. No, we're not going to do that. I want you to go over to browse and I want you to type in here Microsoft.ASP.NET Core.mvc.testing. All right, and there it is. Okay. So we'll choose this. Don't go on, just stop right there. All right. Now, it's a little different if you take a look right here. You see we've got projects, we've got bookstore, and we've got bookstore tests. Tests. All right. And I think if we click here, it'll check all of them. Now, what I'm about to tell you is this may not work. We may have to change it, but I'm going to try it like this. Remember that what is installed right here, what we're using is version 6. This is version 7.0.5 on this. Sometimes they make you go and use the exact same version as the version of .NET we're using. So what I'm saying is I'm going to click install. This may or may not work. All right, I'm going to click I accept and see if I get any errors. See, it still says install, so it looks like it did not install it. All right, well, remember that if we come in here, don't do this, just kind of watch what I'm doing for a second. If I start up a new one of these, and I come in and create a new project, you've seen all this junk already. And just like we always do, I'm going to change this back to Windows, and I'm going to change this back to web. All right. And I'm going to come back in here and type in model. And this. Next. Next. This is what I'm looking for. .NET 6.0. So I'm just going to cancel this. All right. And I'm going to try this again. So what I'm doing is into the version, I'm going to go over here and I'm going to go down to 6.0 right there. So now I should have the same version as what I'm running. I think it was the same. And I'm going to click install again. And I accept. Oh, son of a gun. Still says it's not installed. It says the package was built from source code, boom, 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 version 6.0. It's not giving me any errors here. It's just telling me that it's not going to take the same thing. I thought that was exactly what we just had was 6.0. All right. And there was no 6.0.0. Let's look at this. The 6.0.0 is the right version, I believe. When we just did that, and I should have kept that up and I didn't. That says .NET 6.0, long-term support. We don't want 7. Son of a gun. Now, when this guy goes through the example in this 20-minute long video, this is the change he has to make. But when he makes the change, of course, then it worked. It's got to be wrong. It can't be 601. Son of a biscuit. Oh, there we got it. Okay, so I had to just not click the one up here. If you've clicked that, click on it again so it goes away and just check the bookstore.tests, just that one. Then go through the install process. Now it says it's installed. I want to double check it the way I always do. And that is, I'm going to close this. I'm going to reopen it. And I'm going to look under installed and see if it's in there now. There it is, Microsoft ASP.NET core.mvc.testing. All right. So one more time, if I did do that too fast, all right, go over to Tools, NuGet Package Manager, Manage NuGet Package Solution. It's already up, but so once you get into that, go to Browse, type in here again, Microsoft.ASP.NET Core.MVC.testing. All right, it's already installed, but I'm going to put it in there anyway. So right there it is. And on here, make sure that the only thing you check is just this bottom one. And then click install. All right. Hopefully this is going to work okay. And if it doesn't, we'll just have to keep going on as though it did. All right. Now, we want to make this available to us. So we want to put a using statement up here. And this will be Microsoft.ASP.NET And you can see that it's all in there. Now, the good news is, don't worry about it being gray. That's okay. All right, that's fine. But it's gray because we're not using it yet. But it does recognize it. So it did recognize the install. Okay. Now we're going to put some more using statements in here. All right. And if you want, I mean, we can be real quirky and put them in alphabetic order. The first thing, as we just looked at in the book, was it said you need to put a using statement in there to your project. Our project is just called Bookstore. So I'm going to say using Bookstore. All right. All right. Then we've got our testing. Now, with the stuff that we want to work with, some of this right now we're not going to use until a little bit later, but I want you to see this. So we're going to add 3 more using statements. Using system.net.http. If it doesn't make sense what we're doing, hopefully it will very shortly. Using system.threading.tasks and using XUnit. All right, so those are our statements. Now I'm getting errors here. I'm not sure why. All right, so I'm not going to worry about it right now. We'll see once we get through here if we're going to keep getting errors or not getting errors. All right, okay. So we've got our public class unit test 1 right here. And I'm going to come in and try to put in a constructor for this. I don't remember if I got to change it here or up here because I foolishly don't have, my notes are not complete, but we'll see right now. In fact, we're going to do this. See if I get an error on this or not. The name of our project, which is bookstore dot startup. All right, it doesn't like this, so let's see what this says. Doesn't like that either. Lovely. Okay, I'm just going to keep going. Let's just work on this here. All right, well, this is not a great start, as you can see. All right, so I think what I'm going to do, I don't want to waste your time. I don't want to waste my time. I'm going to go back to this guy's presentation and we're going to watch it together, and I'll stop it when necessary. All right, so we can go and try to make the changes. So this is it right here. This project's running. There we go. Okay, that's one thing we didn't do. So let's do that right now. All right, so under this bookstore test, right mouse click where it says dependencies, choose add product reference, and we want to choose the bookstore and click OK. Now, that may not have changed anything as far as our errors, but we needed to do that. So one more time, under your bookstore.test that we just added, right mouse click where it says dependencies, choose add project reference, and make sure that the bookstore one is checked, and then click OK. Now his worked, even though he had everything checked. With mine, it only worked when I checked just this one. We'll see if that has any effect on this or not. Okay, there was our minds wrong. So all right, I'm going to make changes to this. How am I going to do this? All right, I want to be able to see this as I'm making them. So Okay. All right, so if you're following along, hopefully, go ahead and put that in at the top, and I'll give you a second to add that. And we're going to need to add something for later, so we can just put it in right now as well. That is like that. So please put in those 3 lines, line 9, 911, and 912. And I'll go back and see what he's doing. All right. Let's see. Okay, it's just telling us with these warnings, we're not using this yet, and that's why it's giving us the warning. Okay, so hopefully you had a chance to put that in. This is the constructor he's putting in right now. All right. Before we do that, let's just get this in there. All right. We're going to use this client in a little bit. I kind of mixed up his steps a little bit, but everything that I'm telling you to put in, we will be using. So please go in and add all of this that's in blue here. And while you're putting that in, what he'll want to do next, all right, what he'll want to do next is he'll want to test to make sure that the home controller index page is loading. So he's going to create a method rather called test home controller index loads. All right, it won't require any parameters, so it'll be a fact like you see in there. So we're going to write that one. In fact, I think he was going to just call it right here and retype over that. We'll see in just a moment. But again, if hopefully now you've had a chance to put in all of these using statements, all right, and also get everything done so you're through line 18 here, all right? Back into his present. All right, I'm going to stop it again. And he actually brought up some really good points that you may or may not have been aware of as he was doing this. All right, so we want to do this. We're just going to check our home controller. So we're going to call this just home index loads on ours. So we don't need this unit test 1, so we'll just put it here. So all right, and I'm going to use the same stuff that he uses. And then the last thing is the assert. So. All right. I'm going to give you a second to put this in, and then I want to talk about it. And then I want to talk about how we can make it. We're going to run it in just a second, but how we can make it not work. So please put in this. This was originally just called unit test 1. So change the name and type in everything you see there in blue, please. So basically what he's doing there is he's starting up a browser and go to that page because that's a valid address for this, and it should return 200. Maybe you noticed originally when he did this, all right, that rather than putting the 200 in here, he had the code in here. Yeah, he was doing the work in here. That violated one of those best practices that we talked about. In other words, in the assert, you should only be doing testing in there to see if something worked or something didn't work. You shouldn't be writing any other executable type of code. So he took this that he had put in here and he took it out and he put it inside of the act section, because that's the way you're supposed to write these. Now, I'm going to put this in, but I'm going to comment it out. I'm going to add another line of code here, but I'm going to comment it out on purpose. So this will be commented out. This should succeed because the 200 just means that it worked. If we want to make it fail, we'll give it a code like this. Remember, 404 means file not found. So what we're going to do in just a minute, following his lead, is we're going to run this in the Test Explorer window. We're going to look and see if indeed we get that green check mark, meaning it worked. If it does work, then we're going to come back here, comment out this line, uncomment this line, and then run it again. And then when we do that, what should happen is it should fail. So we should get the red X instead of a green check mark. All right, so let's do a file save all here. All right, and I'm going to jump back into his presentation then. All right, let's do exactly what he just did then. So I'm going to come down into here where this is what we're testing again, is basically everything that's in here. All right, so again, it didn't do that, but it does. I'm going to go to test, and I'm going to go to run all tests. And for whatever reason, it's opening it up over here, but that's okay. That's my test explorer. His is on the bottom. For whatever reason, mine's up here. But let's see when we do this and open everything up here, if it does come out green. No, it's coming out red. It says one failed. So first, let's see if we can figure out why it failed. All right. Could be that I gave it a bad path. Could be that that slash doesn't belong there. I'm not positive. Let's see if doing that fixed it. If it didn't, I'm going to change what I'm testing here. No, it still failed. So first, let's take a look, and let's look under our regular project now. And I'm going to go to controllers and home, and under views, I have an index. So I don't know why it wouldn't be showing that. But under books, we've got a details, and under books, we've got a list. I believe that what I called home is what he called his book and list, or whatever the heck it was. But I'm looking in here for some reason this should have failed. That's right. Response. Get async. I think that slash should be in there, but I'm still not sure why this isn't working. And int code equals int response dot status code assert. All right, it says failure expected. It says it was expecting a 200, it was getting a 500. So to see if we can make this work, because that's what I'm trying to do here, I'm going to change that to a 500. All right, I'm going to save this. And I'm going to run again with doing a test, run all tests. Now I want to see if it turns green now. And it did. So it worked. All right. So again, if I come in here now and I do that, and then this should fail, because it was getting a 500, and I'm telling it now to expect a 404. So I'm going to do a save all and do another test, run all tests. Again, this should fail. Good, and it did. All right. Now I'd have to go back and actually look at the status code 500 to see what that means. And I'm not sure why he got a 200 and we got a 500. I'm not sure about that. I'm not going to worry about it right at this second. So let me minimize this. Try it again. There, I docked it. All right, I'm going to go back and comment this one out and uncomment that one that works. And let's just look and see what that is. Well, that's saying internal server error. That isn't good. All right. And I don't know with yours if yours worked or didn't work. Can I ask you, John, did you get the same thing as me? Are you there, John? Because you're muted if you're there. All right. Well, I'm just going to keep going. It did give me an internal server error. It says it indicates that the server encountered an unexpected condition. that prevented it from fulfilling the request. Well, that isn't great. It's a catch-all response. Usually it indicates the server can't find a better one. Yeah. Not sure what the problem is, but I'm going to keep going on in here. I am on step 14 of like 22 here. All right, so we did the save and the test. Then we did the 404 and tested it again to make it fail. All right. Now, what I want to do is I am supposing that this worked. The thing that's in here that it worked. All right, get rid of that. So I'm assuming again that it worked. Well, I should make it work. Doing another test, run all tests. All right, and it's green now, so it did work. All right, now what I want to do is I don't want it to run this anymore. We've already ascertained that we can get it to work. So I'm going to come in here and say skip equal moving to theory. Remember what theory is. This was a fact because it had no parameters. We're going to go down here now and write another routine. And that routine that we write will be theory, meaning it will take parameters. All right. And what we want to do is we want to test our pages in here. Now, these may all fail. Since the first one failed, these may all fail. But when we look in here, I want to see what's going on in here. So I'm going to give it some inline data. All right. And I'm going to give it about 8 of these. This is most of the stuff that we've got running in here. I'm going to change these. So there is just home basically. And then we want to put in home index. And then we have a book details and a book list. And then we have a cart checkout. And we have a cart edit. And we have an author details and an author list. And if you wonder where I got all those from, they're all from inside of my views. The slash should be just running the layout file. And then we've got what? We've got home index. That's this one. Oops, sorry. Don't need to open that. That's this one. All right, next, under book, we've got details and list, which are this one and this one. Then under cart, we have checkout and edit. And there's an index under there too, so we can add that. All right, and then finally under author, we have details and list. So that's all of them right there. Now we haven't written any method yet, but we've got all of the data. So this is the data that we're going to provide into this method that we're writing right now. We'll call it test all pages. And that URL is going to be whatever these things are inside of the quotes. All right, so again, we want to use this AAR pattern. So we want to arrange, which again is where we build or create the test. And that'll be var client equals underscore factor dot create client. Then we will do the act. And again, that is do the work being tested. All right. And then finally, we want to do the assert. Now, for my assert, I'm going to check for 500 because before when we checked for 200, it didn't work. So I'm going to try this. Just like that. All right, so with everything that's in here, then it's all to right there. Let me check and see if somehow, John, you got dropped. Doesn't say you did. So I'm taking for granted that if you weren't there, you just weren't there. All right, so this is the data that we're testing. That each one of these things in the double quotes becomes this. All right, and we're telling it to run through all of these to see if these work. And again, when we put the 200 in before, for this one, it failed because it said it wanted a 500. Once we put in a 500, it succeeded. So I made this a 500 right now. Lovely. Well, you can see what happened in here. Some of them succeeded. All right, and some of them failed. Maybe that's a good thing. 6 passed, 3 failed, and 1 was skipped. All of the ones that failed were the shopping cart. All right. And with the shopping cart, as it says, it gave a 200 back. All right. For the cart checkout. So that was expecting a 200. And the cart index was also a 200. So we can check those separately. All right. And the cart edit was a 404. The reason for that is with the cart edit, all right, that actually isn't implemented in here, I believe. So let's try this. I'm going to comment out a bunch of stuff. I'm going to keep the cart checkout here and the cart index. And now I'm going to actually check for a 200 response. And I will do a test, run all tests, and let's see if those pass. And as you can see, 2 tests were passed. 1 it says was skipped. That's the one we put the skip on before. All right. I wanted to try one more thing in here to see if we can get it to work. We'll just check it out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this entire thing that we just tested here, this theory, everything that's here, and I'm going to comment out the entire thing. All right, so I'm going to go all the way down to here and I'm going to comment it out. All right. Now, what I'm going to try to do here is I'm going to try to be able to run here a couple different tests. I want to test my author stuff or my book stuff for titles. I want to be able to test my genre stuff for a genre and my author stuff for authors. All right, so let's see if we can do that. Then I'm going to take a 5-minute break. Now I'm going to write this as in here. I just commented that out. There's another way of doing skips and stuff. What I just did was the easiest way of doing it, or at least the easiest for me. All right. So I'm coming in here now to write another. And I'm going to uncomment all this stuff. Right. Just grab one of these. That. All right. So the first thing I'm going to do in here is I'm going to go in and I'm going to check. Doesn't matter which one I do first, but I'll check some book stuff. All right. So this will be checking for books. Now this will be different. All right. So what books do I want? Remember before I took a picture of this. Where is it? There. So my book titles I want to look for, I'm going to put in 2 titles that exist and 1 title that does not exist. So we've got 1 title that's 1776, 1984, and then there were none. Band of Brothers, that is spelled wrong. And I'm going to just put in, what do I want to put in here? Harry Potter. I don't know if they have any Harry Potter in theirs or not, but we're going to check that. So this is going to end up being our data that we're going to check in our checking on titles. So we put that down here. All right. So the first one then will be 1776. We'll have what? 1, 2, about 5 of them, right? All right. 1776, 1984, and then there were none. Band of Brothers, and Harry Potter. All right, I can get rid of all this now. I think I lost a curly brace. There we go. All right. So this will be another public async task. We'll call this test for titles. The string we'll pass in will be the title. All right. And again, we're going to do just what we did before, basically. So I'm going to copy all of this stuff in. So we'll do the arrange. And we'll do this var response. This won't be URL anymore. All right. What we have to do here, we're going to look for this. So this should be under /books/ /book/index. Now, doesn't look like it likes that, but if I put it in double quotes, it might. Like that. All right. That's going to return everything that's on the page. So we're going to say var page content equals await response dot content dot read as string async. And then finally, we're going to have var content string, and that'll be equal to page content dot toString, like that. And then our assert will just be assert dot contains title. Try that again. Title in content string. All right, let's save it, run it, see if it works. All right, give me a bunch of failures here, so let's look. says it didn't find this or this, didn't find this or this or this. So it's giving me failures on all of those. So everyone failed. Let's see if we can figure out why it failed. All right. Under book, we don't have an index. So I'm going to change that from books indexed to book and not index, but I'm going to try list. So let's see if we get that to work. So save all, test, run all tests. See if it fails again. And it did. All right, it's still saying failure not found. It says the type initializer threw an exception. Well, as long as I'm getting these errors, there's no sense in going on. I'm going to stop right now, and I'm going to do three things. Number one, all right, I'm going to go and answer questions that anybody has asked for today. Then number two, I'm going to try to fix this. All right, and then whatever I said I was going to do before. All right, so I'm going to stop right now, and we'll pick it up right here tomorrow, where I will hopefully have something where I can test titles, I can test authors, and I can test genres. And I'll be back with that then tomorrow.